Pokrovsk is emerging as a different kind of battlefield test, where the opening struggle is no longer for ground, but for the simple permission to move. Footage from the sector shows that what appears on paper to be a conventional push toward defensive lines takes on a harsher form in reality, as small groups attempting to cross short stretches of exposed space are met with rapid strikes from the air. The decisive layer of the fighting near Pokrovsk is not the trench system, but the low sky, where unmanned aerial vehicles observe, track, and punish even brief errors in movement. This shift has turned the approach routes around Pokrovsk into zones where safe shadows can transform into traps within seconds. The report follows the evolving conditions shaping this front, where darkness no longer guarantees concealment and where both sides operate under the growing influence of drone networks. A central question now concerns how Russian forces attempt to move quietly toward Pokrovsk and how Ukrainian units work to intercept those movements before they develop into a coordinated attack. Russian teams are attempting to close distance using dispersed movement through tree lines, drainage dips, ruined structures, and field edges to avoid predictable routes and reduce their visibility on drone feeds. These groups rely on low light and poor visibility to mask progress. Yet those same conditions slow their advance and leave a detectable pattern that Ukrainian reconnaissance can exploit long before any direct engagement. Reports from the front indicate that Russian units increasingly time movement to coincide with fog and low visibility, aiming to slip through gray zones where constant drone coverage is more difficult to maintain. This forces Ukrainian defenders to extend their observation network, searching for early signs of infiltration. However, fog compresses perception for both sides, often leading to pauses and predictable movement along familiar edges, creating behavioral clues that experienced observers can read even when the horizon is blurred. The battle around Pokrovsk often begins before the front line senses contact, shaped by the effort to identify and disrupt these teams during their approach phase. In the Pokrovsk sector, Ukraine is attempting to counter these infiltration patterns through a combination of ground observation, short-range reconnaissance, and persistent aerial scanning. Instead of relying on a single sensor, a layered watch system is used to detect small disturbances, such as fresh tracks or heat signatures, that separate random background noise from a genuine approach. Once a team is confirmed, Ukrainian units aim to maintain distant contact rather than wait for a close clash, allowing targeting systems to tighten and strike before the infiltrators reach their staging point. Early detection removes the advantage of surprise, disrupts coordination, and forces Russian groups into disorganized movements that expose them further. As this front line continues to evolve, the determining factor is increasingly the side that can impose control over movement from the air. Subscribe for clear, grounded battlefield analysis you can trust. The core of the fighting near Pokrovsk is now defined by the interaction between infantry movement and rapid drone response, a combination that shapes events before ground forces make contact. Ukrainian units report that many Russian infiltration teams are being identified and struck while still maneuvering into position. Even short pauses, taken to listen or reassess direction, create moments of exposure long enough for aerial observers to confirm a target and initiate an attack. Once tagged, these teams lose the benefit of surprise, their spacing breaks, and their advance slows, resulting in isolated groups that cannot coordinate follow-on movements. Commanders describe this early disruption as a central factor that shifts the overall fight from trying to stop a breakthrough to preventing an approach from forming at all. The intensified use of FPV drones has further changed the tactical environment. These drones engage exposed infantry not by searching broadly, but by locking onto motion and committing quickly. Mini strikes occur before ground forces can react, and the speed of approach often leaves soldiers with minimal warning. Returning fire rarely provides a reliable defense because troops must stand and track a small shifting target, exposing themselves further. Drone operators frequently use terrain to mask the final approach, appearing at low altitude and shifting angles in the final 1 or 2 seconds. This dynamic creates scenarios where a pause that once offered stability now becomes a risk, and a brief regroup can turn into a cluster easily detected and attacked. Frontline accounts describe the cumulative impact of FPV pressure on Russian infantry organization. A single hit can force nearby troops to scatter, breaking communication and destroying unit cohesion. Once the formation fragments, movement becomes louder, slower, and more predictable, giving drones additional opportunities on subsequent passes. Small disruptions compound into larger operational delays, affecting resupply, casualty evacuation, and the timing of planned assaults. These delays reduce the ability of advancing forces to maintain tempo, which Ukrainian defenders rely upon as a key counter to repeated probing attempts. Concealment challenges are also increasing. Ukrainian drone operators report that simple methods such as blankets, raincoats, or sheet metal coverings do not offer durable protection. While these materials may distort a heat signature or shape briefly, UAVs observe patterns over time rather than rely on one static image. Even slight movement, disturbed ground, or mismatched shadows can reveal a location. A soldier who freezes in place may inadvertently provide the operator with the stationary frame needed to adjust angle and confirm the presence of a target. Terrain that hides a silhouette from one direction may leave it exposed from another, and drones routinely reposition to exploit those openings. Thermal imaging magnifies these vulnerabilities. A warm body can leave contrasting traces around its hiding place, revealing itself even when partially covered. Operators often mark suspicious areas, circle away, and return minutes later with a clearer picture. Footage from these sectors shows strikes on stationary individuals who appeared concealed, but Ukrainian sources emphasize that the decisive detection often happened earlier, when the soldier arrived, shifted equipment, or paused in a predictable spot. This process underscores the shift from hiding as a momentary tactic to hiding as a sustained behavioral discipline, where any pattern can become a cue for a strike. The pressure has also shifted onto vehicles and supply nodes around the Pokrovsk area. Light transport trucks carrying ammunition, water, batteries, or evacuation equipment have become priority targets, because interrupting these deliveries can stall entire defensive or offensive efforts. FPV drones exploit moments when vehicles pause to unload or reposition, striking before crews recognize they have been observed. Even when a vehicle survives, the loss of time, route blockage, or the scattering of personnel creates cascading delays. These delays extend beyond the strike itself, affecting unit tempo and the broader operational picture. Ukrainian drone reconnaissance increasingly targets signs of functioning command or logistics posts, such as generators, antennas, and repeatable vehicle traffic patterns. Destroying a generator can reduce communication, night operations, and UAV support in the affected zone. Damaging or disabling a drone control node can reduce sortie rates by cutting access to equipment, power, and spare parts. The resulting loss of capability may not appear dramatic in a single clip, but can shape the sector by disrupting the chain that links reconnaissance, targeting, and strike options. Both sides treat these UAV teams as high-value assets, and the contest over keeping these systems operational heavily influences daily movement rules in the Pokrovsk area. Additional reporting from the sector around Pokrovsk indicates that night fighting has been reshaped by widespread access to thermal imaging and persistent UAV coverage, reducing the protective value of darkness. Thermal devices highlight contrast rather than rely on visible light, allowing operators to identify warm bodies, engines, and tight clusters even in blacked-out conditions. Ukrainian drone units emphasize that many breakthroughs once attempted at night now leave clear signatures when troops pause at field edges, reposition near damaged structures, or regroup along familiar lanes. These fixed points become markers for UAV teams, which can then begin tracking movements and preparing strikes long before an assault becomes visible from the ground. Fiber optic FPV systems add a separate layer of pressure because they maintain control even in areas affected by electronic warfare. Conventional jamming that disrupts radio-linked drones offers less protection against cable-guided variants. Although the fiber line imposes its own limits, such as potential snagging and restricted range, the fundamental assumption that jamming guarantees safety has eroded. This forces attacking forces into slower, less predictable movement routines, increasing fatigue and reducing their ability to coordinate multiple teams along a shared timetable. Troops in the Pokrovsk direction report that this disruption affects not only strike threats, but the broader rhythm of operations, extending transit times and complicating preparations for synchronized pushes. The Ukrainian reconnaissance-to-strike sequence in this area functions as a layered structure. Observation drones scan routes, confirm movement patterns, and identify likely entry points. FPV units then deliver rapid strikes when coordinates are stable, targeting infantry groups, halting vehicles, or exposed equipment. Bomb-carrying drones follow by hitting shelters, command points, or vehicle caches that remain after initial attacks. The objective is not only to inflict direct losses, but to deny the attacker time and space to mass forces. When small groups arrive out of sync or vehicles hesitate for fear of detection, the build-up phase collapses, making a larger offensive unlikely to develop. In this environment, UAV dominance can stop an advance before it appears on conventional battlefield maps. Analysts caution against interpreting selected strike footage as evidence of total control. Videos highlight confirmed hits, but rarely reflect the full operational picture, which includes missed attempts, decoys, counter-drone actions, route adjustments, or weather-related limitations. Observers note that a cautious reading of available material provides a clearer understanding of the trend. The side that maintains consistent visibility over movement gains the operational advantage. Around Pokrovsk, this means control of the low sky increasingly determines the tempo of both offensive and defensive activity. The area now resembles a live test ground for modern warfare, where UAV networks influence not just specific engagements, but the structure of daily operations. Infantry movement, vehicle resupply, and night approaches must conform to conditions set from above. A stalled vehicle, a tight cluster of soldiers, or a simple pause at the wrong moment can trigger delays that ripple across an entire frontline segment. In this environment, attacks risk losing coherence before reaching the main defensive line because every meter of movement is contested. Operational assessments suggest that near-term advantages will belong to the side able to sustain a stable, layered UAV system combining reconnaissance, FPV strikes, and follow-on attack drones. Over the medium term, adaptation in spacing, movement routines, counter-drone measures, and weather timing may reopen opportunities for both sides. Analysts also note that claims of full aerial dominance should be treated cautiously, with real indicators emerging instead from measurable changes such as the frequency of infiltration attempts and the pattern of supply route disruptions. The fighting around Pokrovsk demonstrates how modern drone warfare has shifted the balance of maneuver. Movements that were once routine now require planning, discipline, and constant awareness of the sky. As both sides adapt, the contest will continue to center on who